That stainless steel lunchbox should have contained a cold sandwich, not a nationwide conspiracy against the elderly. The moment I lifted the lid, my 67 years of quiet retirement shattered. I discovered my son was not just stealing my home, but was the linchpin in a predatory empire. Standing in my kitchen, the fragile grandmother died, and the cold, calculated financial investigator I used to be woke up for one last, ruthless case. My name is Gloria Hartman, and at 67 years old, I thought the only battles left for me were against the creeping damp in my joints and the weeds overtaking my garden. I stood in the hallway of the small bungalow on the outskirts of Westbridge, Washington, a house that took 35 years of sweat and scrimping to finally call my own. The morning was thick with that heavy, wet, grey mist that soaks right into your bones. The kind of autumn day that makes you want to lock the door and forget the world exists. My phone buzzed on the entryway table. It was a frantic text from Melissa, my daughter-in-law. She claimed the courier service had mixed up the addresses again and sent Eric's lunchbox to my house instead of his new office downtown. I sighed. The sound loud in the empty house. Honestly, Melissa. I muttered to the empty room. How hard is it to check a checkbox when the delivery truck rumbled up the driveway? I was already waiting. The courier, a young man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, shoved a stainless steel box into my hands. It was old, scratched, and surprisingly heavy. My wrist gave a dull throb under the weight. A sandwich and an apple should not weigh 5 pounds. I carried it into the kitchen, the metal cold against my skin, my mind still composing a gentle lecture for Melissa about paying attention to details. I set the box on the laminate counter. The metal latches snapped open with a sharp, aggressive crack that echoed in the silence. I lifted the lid, expecting the smell of tuna or perhaps the roast beef leftovers from Sunday. Instead, I smelled cold, stale air. It was a mix of metallic tang, old plastic, and something distinct like damp paper. There was no food. Inside lay a tightly folded stack of documents, a black USB drive smeared with a brown grease stain, a small brass key that looked like it belonged to a commercial cold storage unit, and a thick envelope secured with a beige rubber band. The envelope was bulging. I pulled it out and thumbed the edge. $100 bills. Thousands of them. I dropped the envelope back into the box. The USB drive rolled and hit the steel wall of the container with a sharp click. That sound. That dry, hollow sound of hard plastic hitting metal triggered a sensation I had not felt in 2 decades. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was a physical jolt, a cold spike of adrenaline that cleared the fog of old age instantly. My hands, usually a bit shaky in the mornings, became rock steady. I reached for the folded papers. The logo at the top was familiar Silvergate Senior Solutions. Eric had mentioned them a dozen times at Thanksgiving, bragging about his VIP client that was revolutionizing elder care. Below the logo was a spreadsheet. It was a list of names. I recognized the format immediately: name, date of birth, current address. And in the final column, a dollar figure, net worth. The landline on the wall screamed into the silence, making me jump. I stared at it. It rang 3 times before I snatched the receiver. "Hello," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. There was no answer. Just a hollow, breathing silence on the other end. It lasted for exactly 4 seconds. Then, a soft click. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. That was not a wrong number. That was a confirmation check. Someone was verifying the package had arrived. I looked back at the open lunchbox. The innocent explanation I had been constructing for Melissa evaporated. You do not accidentally send a box full of illicit cash and a hit list of vulnerable seniors to your mother-in-law. This was a catastrophic breach of protocol. Either Melissa had made a fatal error that could cost her everything, or she was sending me a message she could not speak aloud. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the cold laminate bite into my palms. The retired widow who worried about the heating bill was gone. In her place stood someone I thought I had buried the day I handed in my badge. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a retired old woman, but rather an agent of the National Financial Integrity Bureau only this time. The primary suspect was my own son. The silence in my kitchen was usually a comfort, but now it felt heavy, pressing against my temples like a physical weight. I stared at the stack of cash and the flash drive, and suddenly the last few months replayed in my mind, not as a series of disjointed family dinners, but as a carefully choreographed rehearsal. It started in the summer. Eric had come over on a Sunday. Wearing that charcoal suit he seemed to sleep in lately. He did not bring Lucas, my 14-year-old grandson. Lucas rarely visited anymore, and when I asked, Eric always claimed the boy was busy with soccer or coding camp. Eric sat at this very table, tapping his manicured fingers on the wood. "Mom," he had said, pushing a cup of coffee away as if it offended him. "We need to talk about asset management. You're sitting on equity here that is doing nothing. If you title the house over to me now, it simplifies the tax burden later. It is just logic." I looked at him then and tried to find the sweet, messy-haired boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who spoke about his mother's death as a tax event to be mitigated. I am perfectly capable of managing my own house. "Eric," I had replied. He had sighed, a sharp, impatient sound. "You are stubborn. I am a financial advisor. This is what I do. Do you not trust me?" Then there was Melissa. My daughter-in-law always played the peacemaker. Her voice soft and syrupy, but her eyes were always darting around my living room, calculating the value of the antique lamps and the mahogany sideboard. I remembered a dinner 2 weeks ago. She was cutting a piece of pie, her knife scraping loudly against the ceramic plate. "You know, Gloria," she had said, not meeting my eyes. Eric mentioned the Silvergate community again. "It is really high-end. If you moved there, you wouldn't be so lonely. And this house, well, we could utilize it better." I remembered the pause in her voice, the way she stumbled over the word utilize. My family did not know who I really was. To them, and to everyone in Westbridge, I was Gloria, the retired civil servant who spent 40 years stamping forms in a dusty back office. That was the lie I told to keep them safe, and later, to keep myself normal. I never told Eric that the forms I stamped were federal indictments. I never told him that his mother spent 2 decades as a senior investigator for the National Financial Integrity Bureau, tracking down embezzlement schemes that made his little financial advisory firm look like a lemonade stand. Because of that lie, they thought I was dull. They thought I was slow. They thought I did not notice when Eric brought over that medical power of attorney last month. He said it was just in case I fell down the stairs. I put on my reading glasses and scanned the document. It was buried in paragraph 4, clause B. It wasn't just medical. It granted the proxy full control over all real and liquid assets necessary to facilitate care. It was a trap wrapped in legal jargon. I had handed it back unsigned, claiming I wanted my lawyer to see it. Eric had snatched it away, his face flushing a dark, ugly red. "You are being paranoid." "Mom." He had snapped. Then came the red flags I had willfully ignored. The bank statements that arrived open. The strange phone calls, asking if I was interested in liquidating distressed assets. A young man from Silvergate showing up at my door with a folder that already had Hartman printed on the tab, even though I had never contacted them. I wanted to believe my son was just ambitious. I wanted to believe he was just ignorant of the law, not malicious. Parents are experts at blinding themselves to their children's flaws. I told myself, he is just stressed. He loves you. But the investigator in me knew better. I looked down at the lunchbox. The smell of the old metal made me nauseous. These were not the clumsy mistakes of a caring son. This was evidence. The pressure to sign the house over, the isolation from Lucas, the sudden interest in my health. It all fit together. "You didn't just lose your way, Eric," I whispered to the empty room. "You built a highway to hell and tried to make me pay the toll." The scattered pieces of the puzzle clicked into a single, terrifying image. My son was not just a bad financial advisor. He was a predator, and I was the prey he had been fattening up for the kill. I carried the USB drive upstairs to my bedroom, my heart rate steady, but my mind racing at 100 miles an hour. I pulled my old laptop from under the bed. It is a thick, heavy machine from 10 years ago, an absolute dinosaur by modern standards. But it was perfect for this. Before I even pressed the power button, I physically toggled the Wi-Fi switch on the side to the off position. This machine would not touch the internet. If Eric had tracking software embedded in these files, it would scream into a void. I booted it up and bypassed the standard operating system, loading a partition I had encrypted years ago. I used a legacy forensic viewer, a piece of software I had kept from my days at the bureau. It allows you to view files without altering the metadata, leaving no digital footprint that you were ever there. The drive mounted. I opened the first folder titled Master Log. It was a spreadsheet. It contained 42 rows, 42 lives reduced to data points. The columns were terrifying in their clinical precision. Name, age, est, asset value, isolation index, and resistance risk. I ran my finger down the screen. Row 5, Gloria Hartman. Risk low. Status processing. There was a note in the final column, Westbridge property. Revaluation required. Primary collateral for Beacon Ridge project. My stomach twisted. He was not just taking the house. He was leveraging it to fund a commercial development. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a folder named Legal Drafts. My breath caught in my throat. There, in high-resolution PDF format, was a durable power of attorney with my signature at the bottom, the loop of the G, the sharp cross of the T. It was a perfect forgery. Next to it was a deed transfer moving my home into something called the Hartman Family Trust, with Eric listed as the sole trustee. "You didn't even ask," I whispered, staring at the screen. "You just took it." But the worst was in the folder marked Voice Memos. I plugged in my old headphones and clicked on a file dated 3 weeks ago. Eric's voice filled my ears, crisp and clear. He was not speaking to me. He sounded like he was running a training seminar. "The key is guilt," Eric's voice said, sounding smooth and professional. "You have to make them feel like a burden. If they think signing the assets over relieves stress from their children, they will sign anything. Target the emotional insecurity, not the financial logic." I clicked on another file. This one sounded like a phone recording. "Look, The Hartman property is a lock, Eric said. I froze. He was talking to a man with a deep, raspy voice. My mother is... She is old. She is alone. It will be easy to convince her that this is for the best. She trusts me. I just need to frame it as protecting her legacy. I ripped the headphones off and threw them onto the bed. The silence in the room felt violent. I went back to the route folder. The company structure was laid out in a diagram. Silvergate Senior Solutions was just a shell. The arrows pointed upward to a holding company called Silvergate Asset Group. It was an investment fund designed to harvest equity from the elderly and funnel it into high-risk real estate, splitting the profits with a network of crooked lawyers and complicit bank managers. It all made sense. The heavy lunchbox, the chaotic mix of cash, keys, and data. This was his mobile office. This was the go bag he took to lunch meetings to close illegal deals away from his official office network. Melissa sending it to me wasn't just a mistake. It was a 1 in a million leak in a watertight criminal enterprise. I ejected the drive and put it in my pocket. I walked downstairs, the wooden steps creaking under my feet. I went back into the kitchen and stood over the open stainless steel box. It looked so ordinary. Just a beat-up container for a midday meal. But inside was the blueprint of my son's soul, and it was rotten. I touched the cold metal lid. If you let this lunchbox fall into my hands, I said aloud, my voice trembling with a cold, hard rage. Then the game is over. Eric. I did not waste a second mourning the son I thought I had. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I had memorized 20 years ago. Olivia Reyes used to be the sharpest forensic accountant in the bureau, and now she ran legal for a non-profit protecting the elderly. Gloria. Her voice was warm, surprised. It has been 3 years. Is everything okay? I need a meet. Olivia, I said, my voice flat. Code Blue protocols. I have physical evidence of a massive fraud ring, and the primary suspect is family. 40 minutes later, we sat in the back booth of a noisy coffee shop on Main Street. I slid a copy of the files and the flash drive across the table. Olivia, looking elegant in her blazer but tired around the eyes, scanned the printed spreadsheet. Her face went pale. Silvergate. She breathed. She looked up, her eyes hard. We have been trying to nail these guys for 18 months. We knew they were bleeding seniors dry, but we could never find the link between the care centers and the asset liquidation firms. They used too many shell companies. Well, I said, pointing to the drive, I think I just handed you the map. You are the golden key. Gloria, she whispered. But we need technical backup. This drive is encrypted with layers I cannot crack legally. That was when I brought in the cavalry. Tyler lived 2 doors down from me. He was 19 years old, worked part-time fixing servers, and had once spent 3 hours patiently explaining to me why my printer would not talk to my laptop. I found him in his garage, surrounded by monitors and energy drink cans. When I explained what I needed, he did not look scared. He looked angry. His own grandmother had lost her savings to a phone scam last year. You want me to mirror the drive and set up a tracing protocol, Tyler asked, cracking his knuckles. I can do that. If this guy logs in, I want to know where, when, and what IP address he is using. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, we had moved to Olivia's office. She introduced me to Aidan Clark, an agent from the Federal Integrity Office. Aidan was young, sharp, and wore a suit that cost more than my car. He looked at the evidence with the hunger of a wolf seeing a wounded deer. Mrs. Hartman, Aidan said, leaning forward. "This is incredible work. We will take it from here. We need to put you in protective custody while we build the case against your son." I stood up. I might be old, but I still knew how to command a room. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Eric thinks I am a senile old woman who accidentally got his lunch. If I disappear, he gets spooked and shreds everything. I am not a victim in your file. Agent Clark. I am the bait." Aidan looked at Olivia. She just shrugged. "Do not argue with her. Aidan. She trained me. We mapped out the plan. We called it the lunchbox protocol. I would call Eric, playing the confused mother who had peeked inside the box. We needed to see how he reacted. We needed him to panic just enough to make a mistake, but not enough to run. While Tyler set up the recording software on my phone, Olivia made a call to a contact at Riverbend, the nursing home mentioned in the spreadsheet. She put it on speaker. "Yeah. I remember Mrs. Gable," the nurse on the line said. Her voice hushed. "She was transferred to a Silvergate facility 3 months ago. Her house was sold the next week. We were told she wanted to liquidate for better care, but she cried when she left. She said she didn't sign anything." The room went cold. This was not just theft. It was kidnapping by paperwork. "Okay," Aidan said, checking his watch. "We are live. Tyler, are you ready on the trace?" "Ready?" the boy said, typing furiously. "Gloria," Olivia said softly, touching my arm. "You have to sell this. You have to sound like his mother, not an investigator." I sat at the conference table. The stainless steel lunchbox sat in front of me. I ran my thumb over the cold metal lid. It was heavy, scratched, and utterly mundane. "Do not worry," I said, staring at the box. "This will be the perfect prop for my son's final performance." I dialed Eric's number, my finger hovering over the green button for a second to compose my features. I was not Agent Hartman anymore. I was just Mom, the woman who sometimes forgot where she put her reading glasses. "Hi, Mum," Eric answered on the second ring. "I am in a meeting. Can I, Eric?" I interrupted, pitching my voice up an octave, injecting a wobble of confusion into it. "I am so hungry." "Honey?" I opened the lunchbox Melissa sent over because I forgot to buy groceries. "But there is no sandwich in here, just some papers about your company. Do you want me to bring them to you?" The silence on the other end stretched thin. It lasted 5 heartbeats. "You opened it?" Eric asked. His voice was too quiet. "Well, yes," I said innocently. "I was looking for the ham and cheese. Did you need these papers back? Do not read them," he snapped. Then immediately forced a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. "I mean, it is just boring client data. Mom, confidential stuff. Violates privacy laws if you read it. Just close the box. Lock it. I will come by this evening to pick it up. Do not show anyone." He hung up before I could say goodbye. At 7 that evening, Eric's BMW pulled into my driveway. He walked in with Melissa trailing behind him like a prisoner walking to the gallows. Eric wore a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, while Melissa looked pale, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag until her knuckles were white. "Mom," Eric boomed, trying to fill the room with false cheer. "Where is the box? It is on the counter," I said, shuffling toward the kitchen. "I am sorry, Eric. I did plug that little black stick into my computer earlier. I thought maybe it had photos of Lucas on it. But it was just a list of names. Is that a wellness club for seniors? I saw my name on there." The colour drained from Eric's face so fast he looked like a corpse. He spun around and glared at Melissa. "You sent her the wrong box," he hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I told you the blue bag was for the courier. How can you be so incompetent?" Melissa flinched as if he had struck her. She looked down at her shoes, unable to meet my gaze. I am sorry. Eric," she whispered. "I was in a rush. We will discuss this in the car." Eric snarled. Just then, Olivia stepped out of the living room. We had staged this perfectly. She was dressed in a sharp grey suit, holding a clipboard. "Oh, Eric," I said, gesturing to her. "This is Olivia. She is helping me review some insurance policies. She had a question about that annuity you mentioned." Eric blinked, caught off guard. Olivia smiled, a shark showing teeth. "Mr. Hartman. A pleasure. Could we step onto the porch? The reception is better there, and I need to verify some figures with you." Eric hesitated, looking at the lunchbox, then at me, then at Olivia. His greed won. He wanted to make sure Olivia wasn't messing up his plans. "Fine. 5 minutes." He followed Olivia out. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, the air in the kitchen changed. I dropped the senile act instantly, my posture straightened, and I fixed Melissa with a look that had broken hardened criminals in interrogation rooms. "Melissa," I said, my voice low and steady. "Look at me." She slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Do you know," I asked, pointing to the box, "that your husband just put his own mother on a list of victims to be processed?" I expected denial. Instead, Melissa burst into tears. It was a silent, racking sob that shook her thin shoulders. I know. Mum," she stammered, wiping her eyes frantically. I didn't send it by mistake. I froze. I sent it on purpose." She choked out. I switched the labels. I knew. If he found out, he would kill me. But I couldn't let him do it to you. I remembered. You once told me you used to work for the government. You never said exactly what you did. But Eric has always been terrified of how sharp you are. He told me once that you see things other people miss. I prayed you were someone who could stop this. Why are you helping him?" "Melissa," I asked gently. "My parents," she whispered. "Silvergate bought their debt. A huge farm loan in Ohio," Eric said. "He said if I play the part of the perfect wife, if I help him get the seniors to trust us, he would forgive the debt. If I leave, he ruins them." I felt a surge of anger so hot it nearly burned. But beneath it was a profound sadness. I walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me," I said. "You are going to dry your eyes. You are going to walk out there and be the terrified wife. But from this moment on, you work for me. We are going to save your parents, and we are going to bury this company. I am so scared." "Mum," she said, trembling. "From now on," I said, handing her a tissue, "every time you feel scared, you remember one thing: old people are not always weak." The front door opened. Eric marched back in, looking impatient. "Okay. Mom?" "Olivia is leaving," he said, grabbing the lunchbox. "I need you to sign this before I go. It is just a standard review form. It says I can look over your investment portfolio to make sure you are maximizing your returns." He slid a single sheet of paper across the island. "Do not worry about the fine print," he added, clicking a pen and handing it to me. It is standard boilerplate. I took the pen. I let my hand shake visibly. I looked at the paper. It was the document he had brought. But he didn't know that Olivia had swapped it 5 minutes ago when she pretended to organize her papers on the counter. The document I was about to sign looked identical to his fraud contract, but the legal phrasing had been altered to authorize a federal audit of all transactions initiated by the trustee. You know best. Eric, I said, my voice quavering. I signed my name. Eric snatched the paper, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He had no idea he had just walked out of my house carrying his own arrest warrant. The document I signed was a Trojan horse, and my son rode it straight into the enemy camp, thinking he was a conqueror. For the next 3 days, my house became a silent command center, while I drank tea and watered my hydrangeas to keep up appearances. Eric was busy digging his own grave with digital shovels from a safe house downtown. Olivia and the FIO team mirrored every keystroke Eric made. We watched in real time as he used the financial review authorization to access my retirement accounts. He did not waste time. He initiated a transfer of $20,000 to a holding account labeled consulting fees. That is wire fraud, Aidan said over the secure line, his voice devoid of emotion. Count 1, let him keep going. It was a waiting game, and it was agonizing. But the true weight of my decision crashed down on me on Thursday morning. The contact at Riverbend Nursing Home sent a decrypted message to Olivia. 2 names from the lunchbox list had been marked as completed. Their homes were gone. A 3rd name, Mrs. Edith Calloway, was flagged as priority high. I looked at her file. She was 82, a retired schoolteacher with a prime waterfront property. The transfer of her deed was scheduled for Friday afternoon. We can stop it, Tyler said, looking up from his monitors, his young face pale. I can crash their server. I can lock the transfer. The room went quiet. Aidan looked at me. He did not say a word, but I knew the law. If we stopped Eric now, we would get him for attempted fraud on a single count. He might plea bargain down to probation, but if we let the transfer go through, we would have undeniable proof of a racketeering conspiracy involving the bank and the lawyers. We would have the evidence to tear the entire Silvergate network out by the roots. I had to choose between saving one woman's house today or saving thousands of seniors tomorrow. The investigator in me knew the math. The human in me wanted to vomit. Let it proceed, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. Tyler looked at me with horror. But she loses her home. We will get it back, I said firmly, though my hands were shaking under the table. Record everything. I walked into the hallway and pulled out a burner phone we had bought for emergencies. I dialed a number I had found in Mrs. Calloway's file listed under next of kin. Hello, a woman answered. This is an anonymous tip, I said, pitching my voice low. Go to your Aunt Edith at Riverbend immediately. Do not leave her side for the next 48 hours. Someone is trying to isolate her. Do not ask who I am. I hung up and removed the battery. It was a half measure, a bandage on a bullet wound, but it was all I could offer without blowing our cover. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was not Eric. It was Lucas. My grandson stood on the porch, his bicycle dumped haphazardly on the lawn. He looked small in his oversized hoodie, his face pinched with worry. Grandma? He asked, stepping inside. Can I talk to you? I led him to the kitchen and poured him a glass of milk. He didn't touch it. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. It was an email notification. "I hacked my dad's password," Lucas said, his voice trembling. "I know I shouldn't have. But I got an alert that my college fund was being moved. It's gone. Grandma. $52,000. He moved it to something called Beacon Ridge." He looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes. Is Dad doing something bad?" he asked. "Is he stealing from you too?" My heart broke. I went around the table and hugged him, holding him tight so he wouldn't see the fury in my eyes. I could not lie to him. He was the only innocent thing left in this mess. "Your father has lost his way. Lucas," I said softly, stroking his hair. "He is making very bad choices. But you are not going to lose your future. I promise you that." Lucas pulled back and wiped his nose. "He talks about Beacon Ridge all the time. He says it is his masterpiece. A luxury village for seniors. He is launching it this Saturday at the Summit Crest Hotel." I froze. That was the missing piece. Beacon Ridge was not just a project. It was a Ponzi scheme built on the bones of stolen lives. He was using the stolen assets, including my house and Mrs. Calloway's land, as the collateral to secure massive loans for this development. Later that night, I sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. On the screen was the digital brochure for Beacon Ridge. It looked beautiful. Shining glass, green lawns, happy actors pretending to be retirees. "It is a monument," I whispered to the empty room. "A monument built on robbery." I closed the laptop with a snap. "If that is your biggest stage, Eric, then that is where you will take your final bow." The invitation arrived on thick, cream-coloured cardstock. Eric was hosting the Beacon Ridge Project launch luncheon at the Summit Crest Hotel, the most expensive venue in downtown Westbridge. He had invited every major investor, the local bank board, and the top brass from the Silvergate Asset Group. To him, it was a victory lap. To us, it was a kill box. My living room had transformed into a tactical operations center. Aidan had taped a large blueprint of the hotel's ballroom floor to my wall. We studied it like generals before a siege. 3 exits, Aidan said, tracing the lines with a red marker. Main double doors here. Service entrance through the kitchen here. And the VIP exit behind the stage here. We need agents at all 3. "The screen is the weapon," I said, pointing to the rectangle marked Stage. "He is going to use a massive LED wall to dazzle them with renderings of happy seniors. We need to take that wall." Tyler was sitting on the floor with his laptop, surrounded by empty soda cans. He looked exhausted but manic. "I have a back door into their AV system," Tyler said, not looking up. "But I need timing. Once I execute the script, I have about 60 seconds before their on-site tech realizes what is happening and cuts the power manually. You have a 1-minute window to destroy him. 1 minute is plenty." I replied. We moved to the kitchen to record the ammunition. I set up a tripod facing the kitchen island. I placed the stainless steel lunchbox in the center of the frame. I hit record and stared into the lens. I did not need a script. "My name is Gloria Hartman," I said to the camera. "I am a retired senior investigator for the National Financial Integrity Bureau. I am also the mother of Eric Hartman." The box next to me was supposed to contain a sandwich. Instead, it contained evidence of a conspiracy to defraud the elderly citizens of this state. I stopped the recording. It was short, brutal, and impossible to misunderstand. While Tyler processed the video, Aidan was on the phone with a federal judge. He was securing an emergency asset freeze order. The timing had to be surgical. If we froze the accounts too early, Eric would cancel the event. If we did it too late, the investors' money might already be moved offshore. The freeze initiates at 12:15, Aidan told us, hanging up, right when Eric takes the podium. Any transfer attempted after that second will bounce. He will be standing there trying to move millions of dollars, and the system will just tell him, access denied. The most dangerous part fell to Melissa. She sat at my dining table while Olivia taped a thin wire microphone to her chest, hiding it beneath her silk blouse. Melissa was shaking. "You do not need to be a hero," Olivia said softly. "Just get him talking. We need him to articulate the intent. Try to get him to use the phrase asset optimization in the context of the transfers." I think I can do it," Melissa stammered. I pulled up a chair and sat across from her and Lucas. My grandson looked older than his 14 years. He had seen too much truth in too little time. "Listen to me," I said, looking at both of them. "After tomorrow, everything changes. The nice car, the big house, the private school. It all goes away. People will talk. It will be ugly. I don't care about the stuff." "Grandma," Lucas said, his voice surprisingly steady. I don't want to be like him. You won't be. I promised." Lucas reached out and took his mother's trembling hand. "I will stay right next to Mom at the party. If things go crazy, if Dad tries to run, I will make sure we walk toward you. Grandma, not him." That night, after everyone had left, the house was quiet. I sat in the dark living room. The blueprints were still on the wall, looking like a battle map. The stainless steel lunchbox sat on the coffee table, reflecting the moonlight. It looked so harmless. It was just a box. But inside that metal shell was the end of my son's life, as he knew it. I picked up the lid and spun it slowly in my hands. "That box you used to swallow your lunch whole?" I whispered to the silence. "Tomorrow, Eric. Tomorrow it is going to spit out your entire reality for the world to see." The air in the makeshift command center on the second floor of the Summit Crest Hotel smelled of stale coffee and the ozone tang of overheating servers. My eyes were glued to the bank of monitors covering the wall. Downstairs, in the crystal ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly expensive. I could practically smell the mix of heavy perfume and roast lamb through the screen. Crystal glasses clinked like wind chimes as waiters moved through the crowd of investors. I watched my son enter the room. Eric looked magnificent in a tailored navy suit, his hair swept back, radiating the kind of confidence that only ignorance can provide. He shook hands with the bank president, his grip firm, his smile dazzling. Melissa walked beside him, her face a frozen mask of the supportive wife. Though I noticed her fingers clutching her clutch bag so tightly the leather looked ready to tear. Trailing behind them was Lucas. He looked small in the cavernous room. He stopped near the entrance, pretending to tie his shoe, and glanced directly up at the security camera in the corner. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "We see you, kid?" I whispered. Aidan stood next to me, one hand pressing a receiver to his ear. "Asset freeze is armed," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "The federal judge just gave the final green light. The second you give the signal, every account connected to Silvergate and Beacon Ridge locks down. No money out. No money in?" "What is the signal again?" Tyler asked, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Close the lunchbox," I said. On the main screen, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Eric stepped up to the podium, bathed in a spotlight. Behind him, a massive LED screen flickered to life. It showed a drone shot of a pristine, green campus with elderly actors playing chess in the sunlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eric's voice boomed through the speakers. "We are not just building housing. We are liberating equity that has been sleeping for too long." I felt bile rise in my throat. He was talking about stealing homes as if it were a charity act. Suddenly, Tyler slammed his hand on the desk. "No," he shouted. "I am locked out. Someone changed the admin password for the projector." What Aidan barked. "There is a manual override from the tech booth," Tyler said, his voice rising in panic. "Look at camera 4. That guy in the hoodie. He is not hotel staff. He is Silvergate security. He must have seen the intrusion." I looked at the screen. A man was standing over the hotel technician, hand on the console. If we lost the screen, we lost the shock value. If we lost the shock value, Eric might talk his way out of it before the police could move. I did not hesitate. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. "I am going down there," I said. "Gloria." "That is not the plan," Aidan warned, reaching for my arm. The plan just broke. I snapped. "Get me to the side entrance. Now." We moved fast. We took the service elevator, bypassing the lobby. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt too fast for my 67-year-old chest. But my legs moved with a strength I had not felt in decades. We reached the heavy velvet curtains just to the left of the stage. I could hear Eric's voice clearly now, no longer filtered through speakers. And with our unique legal framework, we optimize these assets for maximum yield, Eric was saying. My earpiece crackled. It was Tyler. I bypassed the firewall, Tyler yelled, sounding out of breath. "But the connection is unstable. I have 60 seconds before the security protocol kicks me out again. It is now or never. Gloria." I peered through the gap in the velvet. Eric was standing 10 feet away. He held a remote clicker in his right hand. He raised his arm, his thumb hovering over the button to advance to the next slide. His posture was perfect. His chin was lifted. He looked like he owned the world. He was about to show a slide titled, "The Future of Wealth." I pressed the transmit button on my lapel microphone. "Close the lunchbox," I whispered. Tyler hit enter. The beautiful rendering of the Beacon Ridge nursing home vanished. In its place, projected 10 feet high, was a grainy photo of my kitchen table. The scratched stainless steel lunchbox sat in the center of the frame like an unexploded bomb. Below it, in jagged, blood-red font, were the words, "This is how you pickpocket the elderly in Westbridge." The silence that fell over the ballroom was instantaneous and absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear the air conditioning humming in the ceiling vents. Then, my voice boomed through the high-end sound system. "My name is Gloria Hartman." The recording played. My tone calm and clinical. "I am a retired federal investigator. The lunchbox you are looking at was sent to my home by mistake. It does not contain a meal. It contains the financial death warrants of 42 senior citizens." Eric stood frozen at the podium. His thumb was still hovering over the remote clicker. His face was a mask of total confusion, as if his brain simply refused to process the image behind him. The screen flashed. The video cut to the spreadsheet from the USB drive. Names, addresses, and net worth figures scrolled past. Then came the scans of the forged power of attorney documents. Finally, the audio played. It was the recording from the car. You have to leverage their trust. Eric's voice echoed through the hall, sounding smug and predatory. Make them feel like a burden. Once they feel guilty, they will sign anything. The spell broke. A heavy-set man in the front row, one of the primary angel investors, stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "What is this?" he shouted, his face turning purple. "Is this a joke?" Eric. At the Silvergate tables near the back, the reaction was different. 3 executives in matching grey suits immediately stood up and reached for their phones, their eyes darting toward the exits. They knew exactly what was happening. Federal agents. Aidan's voice cut through the rising panic like a whip. Nobody leave the room. The double doors burst open. A dozen FIO agents and uniformed police officers flooded the room. They moved with practiced efficiency, blocking the main exit, the service door, and the VIP hallway. Aidan stepped into the center of the room, holding up a badge. All accounts associated with Silvergate Asset Group and the Beacon Ridge project have been frozen by federal order. This is now an active crime scene. Eric finally moved. The shock on his face had been replaced by a feral desperation. He lunged toward the tech table at the side of the stage. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Cut the feed. It is a hack. Cut it." He grabbed a handful of cables and ripped them from the console. The screen flickered, but Tyler was one step ahead. The feed did not die. Instead, it switched to a new video file. It was security footage from a courier dispatch office. It showed Melissa standing over an open suitcase. She looked terrified. In the video, she quickly pulled the stainless steel lunchbox from the bag and shoved it into a delivery sack marked for my address. The entire room turned to look at Melissa. She stood near the edge of the stage, trembling so hard I could see her earrings shaking. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. But she did not look away. Lucas, my brave grandson, did exactly what he promised. He grabbed his mother's hand with both of his own. He pulled her physically away from Eric, dragging her toward the side of the room where Aidan was standing. It was a visual choice that hit me harder than any evidence. He was choosing the law over his father. I took a deep breath. I pushed the velvet curtain aside and stepped out onto the stage. The murmuring stopped. Every eye in the room landed on me. I walked to the center of the stage, standing just a few feet away from my son. Eric looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a chaotic mix of disbelief and betrayal. He looked at the screen, then at the police, and finally back at me. "Mom," he whispered, the microphone picking up his trembling breath. "Mom." "What are you doing?" He looked so small. For a second, I wanted to vomit. I wanted to run to him and fix it, but then I looked at the screen, at the list of names behind him. Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Henderson, all the people who didn't have a mother to protect them. I looked him dead in the eye. "You wanted to turn the elderly into numbers in a spreadsheet," I said, my voice steady and cold enough to freeze the room. "Today, those numbers will be your sentence." The aftermath of the Beacon Ridge launch was a blur of flashing blue lights and federal agents shouting orders. By the time the dust settled, Eric, 3 executives from Silvergate, and 2 high-ranking bank officers were in handcuffs. I was not taken to a holding cell, but to a quiet conference room at the Federal Integrity Office headquarters, to provide my official witness statement before the case was handed over to the federal prosecutor. Standing behind a one-way mirror, I looked into interrogation room B. Eric sat handcuffed to the table. The arrogant titan of industry who had stood on that stage was gone. In his place sat a middle-aged man who looked small, exhausted, and terrified. He looked like a stranger wearing my son's face. Aidan stood beside me. "We have Melissa in the other room," Aidan said quietly. "If she cooperates fully, if she gives us the internal communication logs and testifies about the hierarchy, we can push for a plea deal. She could keep custody of Lucas. But the prosecutor is going to look at your recommendation. Gloria, you are the star witness. She stays with the boy," I said without hesitation. "She was a pawn. Aidan. Do not turn her into a queen just to take a checkmate." Aidan nodded. "Eric has requested to speak with you. You do not have to do it." "I do," I replied. I walked into the cold grey room. The guard closed the heavy steel door behind me. I sat opposite Eric. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply placed the stainless steel lunchbox on the table between us. It made a hollow thud. Eric looked at the box, then at me. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking. "You have to understand. I didn't invent this. It is just market trends. Everyone does it. We just found a way to be more efficient with dormant equity. It is complex finance." "Stop," I said. I was trying to build something, he insisted, leaning forward, the chains rattling. "If you had just signed the house over." "None of this," I said. "Stop," I repeated, my voice as hard as iron. I reached out and tapped the lid of the lunchbox. "I know everything. Eric. I read every file on that drive. I listened to you teaching your staff how to manipulate old women until they cried. I watched you steal Lucas's college fund to pay for your stage lights. Do not talk to me about finance. You were not building a legacy. You were robbing graves before the bodies were even cold." He slumped back, defeated. The silence stretched out for a long minute. "There is one file on that USB drive the FIO could not open," I said softly. "It was encrypted with a double-blind password. They think it is just corrupted data." Eric's eyes widened. "I know it is not corrupted," I continued. "It is the ledger for the Grey Harbor Consortium, isn't it? Silvergate is just a franchise. You are kicking money up to a bigger network operating across 3 states." He went pale. How did you know?" "Because I was catching guys like you while you were still learning to tie your shoes," I said. "Here is your choice. You can go to prison for 20 years as the mastermind, or you can give me the password, flip on the consortium, and tell the FIO who is really pulling the strings. You will still go to jail. Eric. But you might just save your soul." For the first time in his life, my son crumbled. He put his head in his hands and wept. It was an ugly, broken sound. Grey Harbor. He sobbed into his palms. "They funded the initial buyouts. If I talk, they will come for me." "Let them come," I said. "I will be waiting." He gave me the password. I walked out of the room and handed the lunchbox to Aidan, along with the piece of paper containing the code. "Make sure the report reflects that Melissa cooperated," I told him. "And Aidan, when you release the names of the victims to the press, print them in bold. I do not want them listed as assets or losses. They are people." That night, the house was quiet. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee. The lunchbox sat in front of me, scrubbed clean, empty. and shining under the pendant light. The back door opened, and Melissa walked in, holding Lucas's hand. They looked tired, their eyes red and puffy, but they were free. I looked at them, then back at the box. The nightmare was over. Eric was gone, but the family, the part that mattered, was still here. Tomorrow, I thought as I took a sip of the bitter coffee, the newspapers will call this the scandal of the decade. But to me, it will always be the day a misplaced lunchbox reminded an old woman that she was not done fighting yet. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a wild ride, and I really hope you enjoyed following Gloria's journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from, so please drop a comment down below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you want to hear more dramas like this, make sure to subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video reach even more people. See you in the next story.